他是第一个踏上新中国领土的美国官员。在美国，他被誉为不是总统的总统，白宫的超级智囊。在中国，他是最尊贵的座上宾。
He's an exciting person to work with because he's always thinking about foreign affairs.
Well, Dr. Kissinger is one of the most charming people I've ever met. He's very funny. He's very clever.
Kissinger is a great strategist. He knows how to shape friendship.
这个人呢，很有学问，他是一个学者。
He had, of course, a pivotal role in opening up China, a role that China has not forgotten, but which America has not either.
中美建交30年来，他频频出现在两国的政治舞台上，为改善两国关系不懈努力着。他就是两个大国关系解冻的关键人物之一，基辛格。
It isn't often in your life that you can do something that's new, that nobody had done for 25 years on the American side.
中华人民共和国中央人民政府今天胜利了。
在60年代这个初期到中期这个时候呢，那么中国就喊出了反帝反修的口号，反帝反修的，那就是美国和苏联一起打了，就是我们把他们都看成是自己的敌人，那么同时呢要同他们展开进行斗争，那么所以就是1966年爆发的文化大革命就对外政策来看，那么当然是强调的就是这套革命的路线了。但是这样做呢，其实是有一个很大的问题，就是作为中国这样一个国家，同时要面对两个对手啊，那么这个压力还是很重的。
新中国成立以后，美国对我们中国一直采取敌对态度，遏制我们，孤立我们，反对我们。不承认我们，而且鼓励蒋介石反攻大陆，霸占台湾，所以我们两国之间呢一直没有来往。朝鲜战争以后，我们中国人民志愿军出兵抗美援朝以后，那么两国的关系更加紧张。
It was an odd relationship because basically there had been nothing since 1949. And so there were virtually no contacts. There was no trade, there was no tourism, there was no journalism, no diplomats, virtually no exchange between the People's Republic of China and the United States. And people living outside China knew very little about what was going on inside China.
But one can learn a lot about China by reading history books. And I went to some universities for seminars to educate myself. That was a little difficult because the professors always wanted to talk to me about current problems, and I wanted to talk to them about long-range problems.
And being someone with a strong sense of history, I think he tried to understand the history of China so that he would understand contemporary China, the China with which he was going to be dealing.
当时的另一个国际语境是，美苏之间军备竞赛愈演愈烈，前苏联的对外扩张意图也愈加明显。1968年8月20日深夜，前苏联悍然出动25万大军，一夜之间占领了捷克斯洛伐克全境。
Fundamentally, it's the U.S. fear of an expansionist Soviet Union that has posed a great threat to America. Therefore, America needs to work out an international movement, international alliance to counter the Soviet aggression. So Americans thought that now China has two enemies, U.S. and the Soviet Union. But at the same time, U.S. has had two enemies, Chinese communism and Soviet communism. And the Soviet Union has two enemies, America and China. So it's very interesting. These three major countries in the world has formed a kind of relationship that each would counter other two major actors in the world.
We had an obligation also to improve our relations with Moscow. But our relations to Beijing made it clear to Moscow that we would oppose any what we called hegemony, namely dominating the world.
他们去决定，就是说他们要打独救就打独救。
就是1969年5月份前后吧，那么毛泽东要求这个陈毅啊，他们这几个老帅，就说来一起去研究中国的对外政策。那么，他们最后得出一个结论了，实际上就是苏联，同美国相比了，苏联是一个更加重要的威胁。那么，中国呢，应该把主要的这个斗争矛头，这个推准苏联。
而美国接触北京的动机，在很大程度上也是出于自身的国家利益。60年代末，尼克松上任时，美国正陷入越南战争中不能自拔。美国政府已逐渐意识到这是自己的巨大失误，但从中抽身又是何其之难。
The Kherson siege turns many Americans against the war. As the battle ends, a Gallup poll shows that 1 in 5 Americans switch from support to opposition.
For the United States, very near the top of their list, perhaps top of their list, was Vietnam. The Americans thought that the Chinese could put pressure on North Vietnam to be more conciliatory, to negotiate in good faith. And there had been negotiations going on between the United States and North Vietnam, and they'd really been going nowhere.
尽管中美政府之间22年来没有任何正式来往，但是沟通的渠道还是有的。
看到吧？可以从这个上面下来。
资深翻译家和外交官郭家鼎，当年还是个将近而立之年的年轻议员，在1958年到1962年间，担任中美华沙大使级会谈的中方翻译，他见证了沟通的艰辛与曲折。
基辛格那时候多年轻，基辛格向他汇报，向尼克松汇报。中美大使级会谈最早是在日内瓦举行，1955年8月1号在日内瓦举行。那么到1958年呢，这个台湾海峡局势紧张了，那么中断以后的谈判又恢复了。恢复的时候呢，是在华沙。一直到华沙1970年2月结束，15年开了135次会议，除了达成一个遣返平民的协议以外，没有任何结果。主要原因就是美国要我们放弃对台湾使用武力。我们说这个是台湾问题是中国的内政，不可能，中国不可能承担不使用武力。
In 1969, he began the bombing of communist sanctuaries in Cambodia. And when the bombing proved ineffective, he also launched a ground assault over the Cambodian border.
1970年，中国因美国入侵柬埔寨取消了华沙会谈，双方也没有约定新的会谈时间。然而，一个小小的乒乓球，却给美国人吃下了一个大大的定心丸。 1971年春，美国乒乓球队意外地接到中国的访问邀请，又在人民大会堂得到周恩来很高规格的接见。这场乒乓外交被誉为小球推动大球，它改变了历史的进程。
When China still considered America is an imperialist country, we did not have an official relationship, but we made a friendship, and we reduced American apprehension, Americans' hostility, and we won some American sympathy and support to China.
美国人主动把那个在华沙会谈的时候，通过一个翻译给我们传递信息，就是尼克松总统愿意跟中国谈那个更高层的问题，更高的政治问题，双边的问题，这已经来了一个信号了。然后我们接到这个信号，毛主席、周总理了解到以后，我们就接过来这个信号。
4月21日，就在乒乓外交后的一周，中国通过巴基斯坦再次向美国传话，中国政府重申愿公开在北京接待美国总统的特使。关键时刻到了，到底该派谁去呢？
And so there was a very interesting moment where Nixon went through all the people he could send. And Henry Kissinger kept on saying, yes, very good idea, Mr. President, but I don't think he would be able to do the negotiations. And then finally, Nixon mentioned a name of an American diplomat and said, look, he knows China, he's been there, he's dealt with the Chinese before 1949, surely he should go. And Kissinger said, great idea, Mr. President, but unfortunately he is dead. And so Nixon knew all along that he was going to have to send Kissinger, but I think he was reluctant to make the decision.
Nixon wanted somebody who understood his thinking. And I practically lived with Nixon. I saw him 10 times a day. All the business concerned with foreign policy went through my office. So he decided that I was the person in the best position to do that.
Kissinger is a great strategist. He knows how to shape friendship, how to convert a hostile relationship to a cooperative relationship. He may not like an enemy, but he considers that for American security, it's more important to place national security interest above the ideological difference.
I was happy to be chosen. It was an exciting opportunity. It isn't often in your life that you can do something that's new, that nobody had done for 25 years on the American side.
Mr. Kissinger is a very strong man, and he felt that he could do this on his own, and he didn't need the Congress. He informed no one. See, my name is Wolf, but he was a lone wolf.
Before I entered government, as a professor of international relations, I had concluded that an international system without China leaves out a large percentage of humanity and didn't make any sense.
尼克松也好，基辛格也好，就是力图呢，就把一个两极世界转变成一个多极均衡的世界。
But the ideal world order is one in which all the major countries are satisfied enough so that they will settle their disagreements by peaceful means. And in general, because the world is so complicated, and the population is growing so much around the world, one country alone cannot dictate what a world order should be.
If you're going to change a major policy, like turning a relationship from hostility and isolation toward friendship or engagement at least, This is a very delicate thing, and you can't afford to fail.
此时，中国究竟对美国持怎样的态度，这一点尚不明确，所以美国认为要先派密使进行试探。
He came to China at the order of his boss, President Richard Nixon, to explore China's mood toward America, how China feels about America, how China look at the present, the then international situation, what China would consider in order to improve relations between China and the United States.
That if we advertised the trip before I went, opponents of the relationship would start setting criteria of what had to be achieved and attach conditions and pay attention in a way that would have made it impossible to have those conversations in such an atmosphere.
I worked on the preparation for the trip at the State Department, but was never told what the trip was about, what the papers I was writing were for. Since I had read the record of the Warsaw talks, I knew, because in fact we proposed such a presidential visit to China, or a visit of an envoy at the last Warsaw talk. So having read that record, I knew what was about to happen.
总理决定成立一个班子，是由总理亲自挂帅，然后有叶帅、叶剑英元帅、黄华、张文静、熊向晖组成一个小组，在钓鱼台4号楼、5号楼，就5月份就开始准备了。准备工作就是要资料，各种准备的这个资料，对基辛格的了解，对尼克松的了解，对整个形势的研究，那么将来怎么对付？那么到7月份的时候，信息已经传过来，那是秘密的。我们的几个人到那个秘密的地方去接那个电话，翻译，再传信，其他人都不知道。
1971年，基辛格收到期盼已久的一封来自中国的密信，邀请他访问北京，为美国总统访华铺路。这封来自周恩来总理的手书，是通过当时巴基斯坦总统叶海亚汗辗转送到基辛格手中的。
基辛格那个时候是尼克松派他到南越，到泰国，到巴基斯坦来访问，根本没有说过到中国，不可能的，因为当时不可想象的，中美两个是敌对国家，怎么能够这么高级的特使来访问呢
？7月6日晚，基辛格在巴基斯坦总统叶海亚汗的招待宴会上突然腹痛难忍。
这个跟叶海亚汗总统是已经没谋好的，就是说，哎呦，你肚子疼，大概因为我们伊斯兰堡天气太热，你到我北边的总统官邸去休息去。那么对外就说去养病去了，休息去了，其实他没去，是秘密的做了他们的外事秘书的苏尔坦汗的这个驾驶的专用的军用汽车，戴着墨镜，戴着大檐帽，4个人就到机场。
Just at the last moment, he did get nervous, and he did say to the president, he was leaving from Pakistan to fly to Beijing, and he said to the president of Pakistan, "Will you come with me?" And the president of Pakistan said, "No, I can't leave what I'm doing here." And so Kissinger went off. But it was stepping into an unknown world for Kissinger.
我们决定，那个派一个8航的专机，张文静那个时候是美大师师长，还有王海荣是礼宾司副师长，还有翻译唐文生，还有唐龙斌是礼宾司的，专门到巴基斯坦去接呢，而且是非常保密的。
We had to leave Pakistan very early in the morning to get here by noon because of time difference, and so we left when it was dark, and there was a bed in the back of the plane where I stayed, and Winston Lord went to the front of the plane where the pilots were, and so he has always said, and he's right, that he got to China 10 seconds before I did.
1971年7月9日12点15分，飞机准时降落在北京的南苑机场。叶剑英、黄华等人已早早等候在此。第一个走下飞机的是基辛格，没有欢迎仪式。简单的寒暄过后，叶帅陪同基辛格坐上红旗轿车，朝钓鱼台国宾馆驶去。
他有点紧张，开头很拘束。他第一次我们在5号楼会谈的时候，他们4个人嘛，还有一个保镖就不进来了，他就带了一大架的文件，他们算了一下有7公分，这么厚，所以他开始就是照本宣读。这个总理呢，什么文件没有，就一张纸一支铅笔，什么东西没有。他很紧张，照本宣读，一页一页的念，整整7公分的文件。那么后来总理就跟他开玩笑，他说：“你不要念嘛呀，随便讲嘛。”
And we would meet usually early in the afternoon, and then work for 15 hours, and he was never interrupted. So he did me the courtesy of honor of spending all this time. He was always calm, but very intelligent. I think of him with great respect. When I came here the first time, I had prepared a speech which I delivered to Zhou Enlai, and there was one sentence in it that said, "So here we are in a country of mystery." And Zhou Enlai held up his hand and said, "Do you mind if I interrupt you? But can you tell me what is so mysterious about China?" Well, I didn't have a good answer to that. So he said, "There's 1 billion of us, and it is not mysterious to us. Think about that." Well, what I learned from that is to learn more about China.
这个人呢，很有学问，他是一个学者，而且他用的语言呢都是带哲学性的，句子很长，不是一个演说家那种很那个简短扼要的，每一句句子就很长很长，所以记他的东西呢很不容易。
中美高层的首次谈判的过程十分艰难。
And there were very, very difficult issues in that first visit. One of the difficult issues was the Americans were pushing for some sort of statement on Vietnam and the Soviet Union. The Chinese were not going to give it, whereas the Chinese wanted a firm statement on Taiwan that the Americans would undertake to pull out and drop their support for it. And neither side was going to do that.
每天开到半夜2、3点钟，回来我的整记录，有的时候是开到11点，我1个小时的会议。我要花4个小时的整理，因为把我是速记，记下来以后要打出来，还要翻成中文，每天工作到早晨5点。
I thought the Chinese leaders would be like Russian leaders, I admit. And of course, there is a big cultural difference and historic difference in conduct between the two societies. So I was used to the Cold War Russia, which was more confrontational and which made an issue of every little thing became a contest. And the Chinese leaders, when I met them, were concentrating on fundamentals, and smaller things could be settled very quickly.
会谈达成了一个最大的成果，那就是双方商定了基辛格此次访华以及中方将邀请尼克松访华的公告。
There can be no stable and enduring peace without the participation of the People's Republic of China and its 750 million people.
这个电视讲话就像一颗重磅炸弹，震惊了全世界。
The announcement I shall now read is being issued simultaneously in Peking and in the United States. Knowing of President Nixon's expressed desire to visit the People's Republic of China, Premier Zhou Enlai, on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China. President Nixon has accepted the invitation with pleasure.
Virtually the next morning, Kissinger got a phone call from the Soviet ambassador in Washington saying, when would you like the summit? We can have it any time. And the Americans then played it very cool, and they said, no, we're already going to China, thank you very much, we'll see you after we go to China. And so it was a way of putting pressure on the Soviets.
The State Department, obviously, as a whole, if you can describe it, felt that it had been cut out.
Nixon did not like the State Department in the United States. He didn't trust them. He felt they were liberals, they were people who wouldn't be in sympathy with his goals. I mean, Nixon was a Republican and had certain goals in the world. And so he had a great suspicion of the State Department.
But it was a great shock and surprise to most people on both sides when the news was released.
We hope that our relations with the People's Republic of China will be improved as a result of the trip. We're not sure what the outcome will be, and we certainly don't want any exaggerated hopes to develop.
The first reason, of course, is that we had a formal relationship with Taiwan at that time and recognized them as the government of China. And so therefore, negotiating how we would change our relationship so that we would recognize Beijing as the government of China was difficult.
3个月后，1971年10月，基辛格再次访华。此行的目的是为了给1年的总统访华做准备工作。其中一个重要议题就是商谈上海公报的框架。
上海公报呢，就是说，这个美方承认，这个承认是 acknowledge。台湾海峡两边所有中国人都认为只有一个中国。acknowledge 要严格的翻译就是认识到，他没有一个义务。我认识到你的立场，并不等于我承认你这个立场。Recognize the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government， 它是承认的。这一条最重要，是唯一合法政府。
Again, take the doctor, for example. For me personally, you are always a star. Taiwan is part of China, and the American government does not challenge that position. This is terrific. From that time on, I told myself, to be a good diplomat, you have to learn from this great diplomat from across that big lake, the Pacific Ocean, the U.S.
勇于面对各方阻力，能够在困境中达成自己的目标，这种越挫越勇的性格与基辛格的童年经历有着密切的关系。年幼时，基辛格的13位犹太至亲丧身纳粹屠刀之下。在他15岁那年，全家为避免纳粹迫害，迁往美国。美国对他来说完全是一个新的天地， 他再也不用担心在马路上行走的时候，对面会冲过来一个人对他大打出手。很快，他就凭着出色的学业成绩和充满智慧的头脑，获得了其他人的认可。
It may also have affected him in his attitude towards the United States. The United States, after all, was the place that he and his family found refuge in. And he did very well in the United States. I mean, he was in the American Army during the Second World War. He then got a scholarship to study at Harvard. And so it may well have helped to shape his views towards the United States.
在哈佛攻读博士学位阶段，基辛格开始逐渐形成自己的政治哲学。他更倾向从历史的探索中找到对当今世界有益的东西，也就是中国人说的“以古鉴今，古为今用”。
He doesn't believe in cynically trying to engage in manipulation or wars in order to stabilize a balance of power. He believes that countries need to maintain relationships so that you don't end up having to deal with a predominant power in the world that is hostile to your interests.
My sense is, from what others have written about him, is that it affected him in the sense of his thinking that stability was very important, that ideology was very dangerous, that trying to keep a balanced world was very important.
1972年2月21日至28日，美国总统理查德·尼克松访华，这就像一场梦幻之旅。
Oh, we were all sort of pinching ourselves, you know. We were sort of in a dream, you know. We thought this was the most exciting thing that we'd done.
In some cases, the reaction of American allies was actually one of shock. The Japanese had not been told of this secret visit, and they learned about it just before Nixon's speech. The Philippines were furious. Indonesia was very angry because none of these countries had been properly briefed or consulted. The British Prime Minister, Edward Heath, was very hurt because he had felt that Nixon was a friend of his, and when Nixon didn't tell him that all this was happening, Heath was very hurt. And I think it contributed to a cooling of relations between the United States and a number of its allies.
I think the public saw that this was a very clever strategic move, and the result over the succeeding months was a real transformation in attitudes, I think, on both sides. The sense in China of rediscovering the United States, and the sense in the United States of discovering a new China that was very, very exciting to explore.
If there was a postscript that I hope might be written with regard to this trip, it would be the words on the plaque which was left on the moon by our first astronauts when they landed there. We came in peace for all mankind. Thank you and goodbye.
Nixon fought the inevitable for 2 torturous years. On Watergate, the House Judiciary Committee passed an article of impeachment charging Nixon with obstruction of justice. But before the House could vote to impeach, Nixon resigned on August 9th.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
就在尼克松访华后4个月，水门事件被披露。1974年8月9日，他成为美国历史上第1位辞职的总统。副总统福特继任。中美建交的事暂时被搁置起来。
And it was not possible in these circumstances to raise the problem of the formal recognition. Then a new administration came in, and they required 2 or 3 years to prepare congressional opinion, which had always thought of China as an enemy. So this is what delayed the formal diplomatic relations. But our relations were in fact improving.
中美建交的谈判仍在缓慢而秘密地推进着。黄华是中国首任驻联合国安理会代表，他和基辛格一直保持着密谈。密谈是在纽约第44街一幢小别墅里进行的。
我们那个时候已经买了一栋楼，在林肯中心，那个10层楼的一个旅店，下面有车库，他就派一辆破车，旧车，很次的旧车，开到车库里边，我们就从车库上车，去黄华和我，还有一个施艳华当翻译，我呢整个管这个整个会谈，包括记录、写报等等。这个车开出去，开到他的44街的门口，停在那儿，我们就上去。他在那儿跟洛德2个人等着，放着点心、咖啡，然后就谈，谈完了就走，就这样维持1年多的时间。
1973年，中美互设联络处，行使临时大使馆的职责。卜立德成为了第一批派驻中国的美国官员。
We were the first sort of resident diplomats from the U.S. in China for 23 years or whatever. Anyway, our job was to set up a small office and to start developing contacts with the Chinese and start working on the sort of basic issues, trade, travel, investment, so on and so forth. We started off very, very small.
在1974年至1975年间，邓小平与基辛格有过多次接触，这也为后来的中美建交起到了很大的作用。最终，在卡特总统执政时期，双方终于达成了协议，美国同意与台湾断交，并从台湾撤军，但是，在对台军售问题上，美国不肯让步。
I was actually in the room when Deng Xiaoping made the decision to go ahead with the establishing diplomatic relations, even though we could not agree on the arms sales issue. So from China's standpoint, that was a very important compromise.
1982年，两国建交3年之后，对台军售的问题才在817公报上得到解决。1979年1月1日，中美两国正式建立外交关系，而基辛格却早在1977年就退出了政坛。虽然没能在自己任职期间促成两国建交，但是基辛格说他并不觉得遗憾。
I'm rather proud of what we did. And I think it is some advantage that several American presidents of both political parties were involved.
I just saw Dr. Kissinger last week at a conference, and I said to him that his efforts in working with the Chinese government to open up China helped so many families, including my own. My father did not see his mother for 23 years. So there are so many Chinese families who were separated unintentionally, who did not want to be separated. And because of the opening up of China and his role in that, he helped to reunify and reunite families.
Dr. Kissinger recognized the importance of the relationship, and in 1989, in the fall, he came to China, met with Deng Xiaoping at that time, and he came again during the period when I was there. We didn't have very many senior American visitors at that time, so I felt that his visits were extremely helpful.
I think conflict between China and the United States is unfortunate for both countries. And I have a certain responsibility as the first American to come here, American official, to maintain that relationship.
1982年，基辛格创建了基辛格联合咨询公司，很多公司的经营者都想通过他去了解怎样在中国做生意。
Okay, Roberto.
据芮孝简回忆，他担任美国驻华大使时，从1991到1995年，基辛格每年都会来中国。他会花很多时间去了解中国以及中美关系的近况。
At this moment in history, China and the United States have a special responsibility. We are the most advanced industrial country, but by a narrower margin than before. China is the most dynamic developing country, and we are on opposite sides of the Pacific. So between us we cover a great part of humanity and the world. So we have a special responsibility to work together closely, and I'm happy that we are making good progress. I like the Chinese people, and I like Chinese culture. And as a student of history, I admire a country, the only country in the world, that has an uninterrupted history of 4,000 years of self-government. That is a tremendous achievement. And I appreciate the human qualities that I have discovered in my Chinese friends of loyalty and reliability and intelligence.
基辛格成为了中国人民的老朋友。他退出政坛后多次访华，依然受到中国政府和人民最高规格的接待。曾经，出于国家利益的考虑，他致力于改善中美关系。现在，在逐步接触中国和这里的人民后，他对这个国家产生出了感情。
Former U.S. Secretary of State Dr. Henry Alpha Kissinger.
My parents taught me to do whatever I thought was most important and whatever could make the greatest contribution, and always to keep that in mind. I'm now in my 80s. I have done what I've done, and people can read about it and make up their own mind about it. But I'm not going to analyze why I did it.